Hello, and welcome to the Vicars Watch Dibley,
the podcast where three priests link our stories to those of the Reverend Geraldine Granger and other TV vicars. I'm Kate.
I'm Jenny.
And I'm Ruthie. This episode we go through the episode called Summer, which is one of the seasonal specials. It's an episode where we talk a bit about protest and the importance of community.
To see you. It's really good weather at the moment, so I'm in quite a good mood. How are you both doing?
I've had a week of massive ups and massive downs because I've had one of those moments in ministry which is really difficult when a key member of the church dies. And it's one of those people who there are certain, it sounds awful, but there are certain people you just think, oh, please just last the entire time I'm here because I don't want to do your funeral because it'll be too painful. And we've had one of those deaths this week, which has been really, really hard. But in the life cycle as well, we've had a difficult death, but I've also gained a nephew this week as well. So it's been like birth and death all in 1 week. So there is a new baby in the family too.
Oh, lovely.
It's been a lot of emotions this week.
Yeah, that's right.
How about you, Jenny?
Yeah, so a similar, I guess, in terms of ups and downs, but not quite that big for me this week. Everything feels very full on still. We've had some, there's lots going on at church at the moment. We've had some downs. We've had some things go missing at church, which has been really difficult. Trying to work out, how to look after things in church is a big problem. Which has been not so good, but some lovely things that have happened as well, and some really breakthroughs with where we're heading this year as a church in terms of our vision and moving forward. But the thing I think that really sticks in my mind, I got a really lovely card this morning from a parishioner, a thank you card for a funeral service I conducted, and it's actually really made my week. And it's that thing that we never do what we do so to be thanked, because it's literally why we're here, it's what we do. But when people just take the time to say, actually, and to write a real heartfelt thanks, and, how their beloved might have felt about the funeral service as well, it's like, oh my goodness, that just means so much. Really touching, and really, it makes me feel like, just good to know that, it felt right. Like, that's such a joy to receive and to, give thanks for, I suppose. So, lots going on, but things are feeling good, and I'm feeling encouraged today, which is nice. How about you, Kate?
Yeah, I suppose I've also had some ups and downs in the last week. We are recording this before Easter, and things have been amping up. The closer you get to Easter, the busier things get. I've been supporting someone through some really difficult pastoral stuff, which I'm not going to get into, but that's really draining and can make you really angry at the world. I have had some fantastic brain fog moments, just like with fatigue, where I filled my water bottle, my litre water bottle with water the other day, and then went to the fridge and got the milk out and poured the milk into my water bottle. Lovely.
Milk.
There was a really diluted oat milk. With lemon, because I mixed lemon into my water to make it more palatable.
What did that taste like?
That went down the drain. Mothering Sunday was really good though, giving out flowers. And just I'm not sure if it's something I've loved, but it's something I found really, really funny. My little dog does not like going out in the rain or getting her paws wet or dirty. So my dog walker has suggested that I get her little rain boots.
This is the kind of content we need to see. Podcast isn't enough.
And I will admit I have got them, and I've tried them on her, and she looked at me so betrayed, and she was so confused. Bless her.
That's so lovely. I love it.
And I took her out into the garden in her raincoat and her boots, and bless her.
Did it work? Was she better in boots?
I mean, it wasn't a wet day. I was just seeing how she, if she was okay walking in them, if they were with the right size for her. And she she was okay. She was definitely moving slower and was less enthusiastic. I mean, she's not enthusiastic about going outside at all generally, but she just looked at me like she was following after me, like, what have you done to me?
Come on, come back and clean
We're
up.
in boats.
She kept tripping over her feet.
Tiny wellies.
That's so funny.
So, yeah, that's fun. What are
Oh,
we
I
doing
love
today,
that.
Jenny?
Well, frankly, we need to be sent pictures of these boots because they sound amazing and little proper nips. But we today are going to be focusing on something nice and warm. We're coming to the last episode in season 3, which has been the specials looking at the seasons of autumn and winter and spring. And today we are looking at the last one, which is summer. Summer in summer. I always think of Olaf with summer.
Yeah.
Sorry, random crossover.
It's
Yeah.
a little bit sad as well, though, as we come to the end of the seasonal specials. We're also very quickly approaching the end of the Vicar of Dibley. We're not that far away, and
Yeah.
Ruthie, you gave us some very sad news about our wonderful
Yes.
Dibley Bible.
Our beautiful Dibley book, which is full of the scripts. Today's episode is the last script in here, and
wow.
it feels like a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you to our script book. You have done us very well. So we're starting to look forward to the future as well and working out. There are still some episodes yet, and we have a plan still to go through things, and we've got reviews, and we're yet to meet Harry. Thank goodness. So
Yeah,
we've got
loads
all
to
that
come. Yeah.
But we're also thinking more about what is the plan for us in the future and this podcast and what we're going to do, and thinking about perhaps slightly rebranding to Vicars Watch Dibley,
Woohoo.
the power of an ED, and carrying on doing stuff and reviewing other things. Maybe we go through another Vicar TV series like Revd or something like that. But we're also thinking about, there's lots of different telly things that maybe we just watch that and you give us some ideas of things to watch, and we look at it and go, that's hilarious, or this is massively offensive, or whatever it might be. So we're coming up with lots of plans, but we're not 100% sure what they might be. So we'd love to know what you would think about it as well. So do contact us on our social media stuff, or email us on vicarswatchdibley@gmail.com, and we'd love to know what to do next.
Yeah, I'd love to get you involved, get your thoughts. That'd be super cool.
Yeah, and I think it's worth saying we think we're going to be covering the last Dibley episode around July. So that's our time frame. But the podcast is not ending. It's going to, like Doctor Who, we are going to regenerate or pivot very slightly as we continue these conversations in some form or another.
We'll just be clawing onto our microphones like, you can't get rid of us. No. So, should we go through our final script?
Let's do it, baby.
We're in summer, and the episode begins in the vestry, which has been something different for these seasonal ones, hasn't it? That we've often begun and ended in the vestry, which is quite a nice thing. And Geraldine and Alice are in there, and they're building a card tower, but not a card tower because they're using hymn books to build a massive tower. Very successfully, we might say as well.
Yeah, we had a little cheer. This kind of annoyed me because I was like, when are you ever going to find the time, just like passing time in the vestry, to build a tower? I was like, I wish I had the time to build a massive tower out of hymn books. Anyway, it's obviously something I need to add to my to-do list in summer. To be fair, the season of summer is a little bit quieter in the church, apart from all the baptisms and weddings. They do make things a little bit more busy, but yeah, I'll note that as a spare activity if I ever get a spare second. Lol.
You do tend to have a bit of a break, don't you? When things kind of shut down a bit and they're a bit slower, so there's space for you to build a hymn book tower if you would like to, Jenny.
Maybe I will. I'll see if I can get round to it this year.
And so from there we go to the parish council, and Hugo comes in and he's brought baby Geraldine with him.
Lovely.
Because bless her, Alice has had a difficult time. She's watched Changing Rooms and is too emotionally drained from it, and therefore can't look after baby Geraldine. Did you watch Changing Rooms back in the day?
Of course.
No, sorry. Just remind. Not really. No, I've got vague recollections. So just remind us / me. Is it the one where people come over and say we're going to change your house, and they like tidy it and paint it, and then families come back?
That's more DIY SOS as a connoisseur of these programs.
Okay.
Changing Rooms is similar. It's a kind of home redecoration. To be honest, it's also psychological torture. It's
my goodness.
Two neighbours, often neighbours or people in the same neighbourhood, friends. They, with teams of decorators, one of whom very famously is Lawrence Llewellyn Bowen.
Yeah.
I remember his shirts.
Yes, exactly, his shirts.
Yes.
That's also what his interior design style was like on the show. If you know his shirts, very flamboyant.
Cool.
But these two basically families or teams would swap rooms, and then they would design rooms for each other. And when I say psychological torture, I really do mean, like, you see these poor people have to act like they haven't just had their friendship destroyed because they put gravel indoors.
So do they never like it then?
Things.
Well, it's not that I never liked
some people
it,
hated them.
Yeah, some people hated them.
It was always like really bold, big colours. And I mean, some people loved them, but some people walked in the room and were just like, my bedroom's ruined.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sleep in here. It's just awful. I'll find you some of the best pictures, Jen.
Gosh, I'm not sure if I could sit through that. I'd be so sad.
And it nearly always involved a really, like some sort of DIY project as well, which they were given, which sometimes were good, like, we won't deny
Handy
it.
Andy!
But Handy Andy!
That was his name, yeah!
But it was for the drama, really. It's not that, and let's not malign the designers. I think they were good designers in their own right, but they were encouraged by production to really push things to extremes.
No wonder Alice can't care for Geraldine, needs to have a nap and a bit of a self-care Sunday or whatever, because, it does sound emotionally draining. Ooh.
Yeah, so David, bless him, is trying to hold the council meeting together, but of course, as it would be, because there's a baby there, everyone's distracted.
This is so true to life as well, isn't it? Like, as soon as we've got some babies in church, as soon as they come along to a meeting or to a service, like, nobody is listening to whatever's going on at the front or the chair, and rightly so. They are blooming lovely, aren't they?
This did literally happen to me today, because we go to a toddler group in the morning, me and my little one, and one of the mums there had just given birth, and so baby is 2 weeks old, and she came through, and it was like just swarms of all the mums and grannies and foster carers just came to her like, oh, there's a baby, we would like to see the baby.
That's amazing.
So everything's distracted, nothing happens, and David accidentally abstains from a vote as to whether his granddaughter is cute or not.
Bit awkward. It's all settled in the end.
But he is very keen. There is actually a very important item of business on the agenda, and that is the Millenium, which, I mean, that is 23 years ago now.
Wow, that's scary, isn't it?
Oh my goodness. So, do you remember the Millenium? We weren't in ministry. We weren't working at that point. We were around 10 years old, I think.
I was 9.
The only thing I remember is that my mum bought me a new outfit for a party that we were going to at a neighbour's house, and that is literally it. I also remember that I really wanted to hold hands with the boy I fancied at the time from my primary school, and that is literally all I remember. So that gives you some insight into where I was at 10/11 years old. No, it would have been 10. Yeah, 10.
Yeah, I remember very weirdly that at the time I was living in Bradford, and there was a Millennium party at the church, the kind of neighbouring church to the church where my dad was a vicar, and they had a 60s themed party. So I went in like a mini dress, and my brother went, as a mini car. So had like a massive cardboard box painted orange that he wore, and we were on the dance floor all night. And the person who was the vicar of that church at that time is now my boss's boss.
No way!
So, yes, bless him. John Day has known me since I was about 4 years old.
Boogieing
so I
away.
saw in the Millennium at his church.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I remember the 2000 glasses. I think we had a party as a family, and I remember us having those glasses, and I think we were allowed to stay up to see the new Millennium in. For some reason, I also remember watching Harry Met Sally, but I can't remember, I can't imagine that I would have watched that with my parents. So I don't know why that's in my head. I know there's a New Year's scene in When Harry Met Sally, so maybe that's why I'm misremembering.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I don't remember us doing I'm sure as a village, Market Town, we would have done something, but we didn't do a statue.
There were beacons, weren't there, in lots of churches? Do you remember that? They had big beacons everywhere that were lit for the Millennium.
Like we did for the Jubilee this last year?
So big metal beacons that were put outside different churches. So this church that I went to.
Oh, yes, that does ring a bell.
Yeah.
There was lots
we also thought the world was going to end, didn't we?
Well, yeah, there was
Y2K bug.
Y2K bug, computers wouldn't handle changing over to 2000, and big fears. I think the big fear was that there would be the stock markets would crash because the computers couldn't handle the change.
Wow.
Changing a date.
Yeah, changing the date.
Gosh.
But that didn't happen.
No.
And I just remember my general memory is lots and lots of chrome stuff.
Yeah,
like,
everything was shiny.
Everything was shiny.
Shiny? What sort of
stuff?
that
Like
was
sparkly things. And,
lots of
sparklers. Everyone was
Really?
metallics.
And everyone was wearing
really?
metallics. And
Yeah.
yeah, do you know?
No, I hardly remember anything. Like I said, I literally remember the boy that I fancied and the outfit I wore.
Oh.
That's really
Well,
sad.
I imagine that in our audience there will be some people who we have just made feel really, really old by revealing
Or
that.
weren't alive.
Yeah, or they will be thinking that we are really old because
Really
we're
old.
reminiscing of millennium.
That's
Do
true.
you remember back in my day? The metallics.
But none of these things make it onto the episode, do they?
No, it
None
doesn't.
of these things get raised. But instead, they want to bring a statue to mark the Millennium.
Yes.
Well, they first of all want to do something for young people in the village, and that's the first plan. But Hugo suggests that, and David thinks it's a good idea, which is great. And then Hugo decides he wants to build a massive cinema, but the budget is only £2,000, so they can't do that.
Yeah.
And that just highlights something about village life, I think, that there's often not much stuff for young people. But they don't do that. They decide they want to put a statue up on the green instead.
Which, for me, it's really odd that is Geraldine's suggestion, because it's more on brand for Geraldine to suggest, okay, maybe not a multiplex cinema, but a skate park or a youth room to be attached to the village hall, or renovate a room in the village hall to be a youth room. Like, those are achievable village youth goals. But no, she suggests a statue, which for me seems more like a David Horton suggestion.
Yes,
I know what you mean.
And they think of someone who means a lot to the village, and so the first suggestion is Carol Vorderman.
She only means a lot to Owen, though, really.
Well,
And maybe
lots of
Jim.
boys.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, they're keen, and so it all gets a bit silly. So Geraldine suggests come up with new ideas of people who mean a lot to the village for the next meeting.
Yeah, and then sort of next item of business is that there is a hosepipe ban at the moment, and they're going through a heat wave, and David chastises Geraldine because she's been using her hosepipe to clean her car. And before we get into the particular content of that exchange, is he being harder on her given the events of a previous episode? Do we see any evidence of the events of a previous episode?
Oh, and that because the ended engagement. I just thought it was a higher level because she's the vicar and therefore should obey things better.
Yeah, for me it just felt like it was just done with. Like, that's ended and there's no
I agree.
reference to the fact that he may have lingering feelings for her or may like, I don't know, it's a bit sad that nothing carries over.
But maybe that's a sign that it was all meant to be. Because if it had carried on, then it had been like, oh, maybe Geraldine should have married David after all.
Never.
No.
Never.
But they didn't feel any sort of lingering, did there?
No.
And it turns out that, Geraldine quotes scripture at him, which is not scripture. She says, Luke 7 verse 11, and Jesus did say unto the disciples, verily an unclean mini metro is an abomination before the Lord. Now, Kate, come on. You've got to have looked this up.
Oh, I looked it up. Of course I looked it up. You know I looked it up because, one, I knew definitely not. That is definitely not Luke 7
Some clues in the text
11.
there, some giveaways, aren't there?
If anyone thought for a moment that was Luke 7 verse 11. But Luke 7 verse 11 does actually exist, which hasn't been true of previous Bible references in this series. So I looked it up. Luke 7 verse 11 begins the account of Jesus raising a widow's son. The verse itself is Jesus went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd followed along with him.
And that's it.
And that's it. The actual the further verses go on to talk about him and bringing someone back to life. To be honest, a much better section of scripture than mini metros an abomination unto the Lord.
And so Geraldine uses scripture to put her point across in a way that's wrong. I wonder if people have ever done that before. And it turns out that David's actually a bit of a hypocrite, and he's been sneakily washing his car and doing the filling the pool and sprinkling the croquet lawn at 2:00 in the morning so that no one sees his behaviour.
Actually, it's a really interesting framing device for this episode because summers in the UK can be unbearable, and like the whole world laughs at us because the temperatures don't get as high as they do in other parts of the world. But our our whole infrastructure is just not built to handle extreme temperatures. So particularly in this episode, extreme heat means that there's a water shortage. Because there isn't the infrastructure to actually support all the water that people want to use. And so there's a hosepipe ban and further and more, and then discussions about how they'll combat that water shortage, which results in our big conflict of the episode. So it's a really interesting framing device.
And so to deal with the issue of no water, we're over in the vicarage, and Alice is watering the plants, and Geraldine's cross like, I need that water. It turns out she's actually feeding the plants vodka.
One way to say it.
Yeah, vodka mixed with baby bio that has a Vimto taste about it. So yeah, it's
let the listener understand, do not drink plant fertilizers. That's what baby bio is. Do not drink plant fertilizers mixed with vodka. Please do not do that.
I was a bit distracted by that reference because I thought, what happens if someone listens to that and thinks, oh, I love the taste of Vimto, I will mix vodka and but hopefully no one will. And let's underline again, we do not recommend this.
We do not recommend this.
But we haven't actually tried it. But it's not
situation.
sensible. It's not sensible.
Yeah.
No.
And Alison and Geraldine have got a bit of a nostalgia trip, don't they? And they talk about, this water sort of shortage is making them realise how fragile life is. And then they talk about changes that are going on. And the big change for Geraldine at the moment that's making her emotional is Des Lynam leaving the BBC. And they all, feel a bit bit nostalgic about this, and Noel Edmonds and Mr. Blobby, which I was a fan of, and apparently that's a controversial thing.
I think he's really scary.
I can't. This really is. I said it to Ruthie before recording. I'll say it on record. This is probably the most controversial thing I've ever heard you say, that you like Mr. Blobby. I'm sure we've mentioned Mr. Blobby before, but
I think we have. Yeah.
For those of you not in the know, Mr. Blobby is a terrifying eldritch creature of nightmares. Kind of part of Noel Edmonds' show. Noel Edmonds was a 90s TV presenter. And Mr. Blobby was a man in a big pink...
pink and yellow suit.
Pink and yellow, not inflatable, but like, not vinyl, but like plasticky.
Like a creepy jaundiced baby.
Yeah, he's just creepy. He's got this big, creepy, red, wide smile and his giant eyes.
Googly
and he goes
eyes.
around saying, "Blobby, Blobby, Blobby!"
And he runs after people.
And he
shouting.
runs after people
very
and he
scary,
chases
guys.
them. And it is, I mean, I'm not as terrified of him as I'm playing it up to be, but he is deeply disconcerting. And there was a Mr. Blobby Land, actually. I saw an urban explorer on YouTube.
Oh no!
I saw an urban explorer on YouTube going to explore this abandoned Mr. Blobby Land.
Okay, that would be sinister. What you need to do is look up the YouTube clip
No.
of the Big Fat Quiz of the Year with Jack Whitehall and Mr. Blobby, because I cry with laughter every time I see that.
Okay.
It's all quite slapstick and hilarious, and yes, I'm gonna send it to you guys in our chat after, because it's amazing.
It's funny from a distance in the way that it's like you'd watch horror for entertainment, or you'd watch kind of horror comedy. You watch horror comedy because it's fun watching someone else be terrified by this terrifying thing. But I think I would not want to be chased by Mr. Blobby because he lacks boundaries, and I find that intimidating.
That's quite a dream, isn't it? Jenny, you noticed something about, moving on from Mr. Blobby, Geraldine's necklace.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a bit of a question, really. I have thought about it in the past, but you really notice it in this scene. So she is wearing a cross, rather than it being like a 16 or 18 inch, like round the top of the, just hanging below the neck, for example. She wears hers lower, which traditionally, I don't know for sure. I mean, it could just be like a preference or a fashion thing. But it is traditionally, like our bishops, for example, would always wear I think, Kate, you called it pectoral cross. So you have it.
Pectoral crosses are kind of some part of the bishop garb and more commonly associated with bishops. It's not that other people aren't allowed to wear them. They're just particularly kind of
like
metal
associated.
decorative pectoral crosses are very associated. Larger ones in particular, like a very large pectoral cross, is associated with bishops. Geraldine's is more of just a long necklace.
Yeah, but then the other interesting thing is that it's an upside down one. So if you think of the traditional cross, you think of the bar, so where the arms of Jesus would have been, or those who are crucified, is kind of towards the top of the vertical bar, but hers is much lower down. So I was watching this episode with a member of family, and they were like, "Oh, I think it's the cross of St. Peter, because it's thought traditionally that he was crucified upside down." But I wondered if it could be that, or if she was wearing the cross almost like upside down, so that when she glanced down at the cross, it looked like the cross the right way up. Like, what's going on there? Or, because, what else could the meaning be?
Well,
an inverted cross.
The inverted cross is heading to Satanism, really. I just thought it was the style decision of the cross and hadn't thought of it as particularly inverted. But yeah, that's certain metal bands decided to wear a cross upside down
really?
as a up yours to Christian tradition.
Do you think that's what Geraldine's implying here?
No, I think it's the style of the cross. Yeah. I need to look at this cross again.
I think it's a St. Peter's cross. I think it's a St. Peter's cross. Like, they've decided that she's wearing a St. Peter's cross for whatever reason. Maybe in the
Interesting.
90s it was less associated, or it was more common to see a St Peter's cross, whereas now we very rarely see St Peter's crosses. We might see a St Andrew's cross, but you wouldn't wear a St Andrew's cross.
I mean, St Francis of Assisi has a slightly different cross as well.
Yeah, that's St Francis is a T-shaped. Franciscans wear T-shaped crosses. I quite like a bridged cross. That's kind of a... I can't describe it without it sounding weird. Look up a bridged cross. They're interesting. They're different.
Well, according to the internet, the tradition tells us that when St Peter was crucified, he insisted to be crucified upside down, as he didn't believe himself worthy to be crucified in the same manner as Jesus. So maybe she wears it as like an act of kind of humility as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to look into this.
Interesting. Anyway, the one for us to
there's lots of
reflect
reasons
on.
why you might choose to wear the type of cross
Yeah.
that you wear.
It's interesting,
Some of it's just because you just like the look of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe not over-spiritualise. She's wearing a cross she likes. I've noticed it in previous episodes that she wears an upside-down cross. And I was just like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Not very on brand of me to not decide to investigate.
You're slacking, Kate. Come on.
Slacking.
So we moved then to the parish council, and it's 2 weeks later from the first meeting. They've skipped a week. Maybe they've had a week off on holiday, and they are all melting because it's so hot. There's fans going on. They've not had water. It smells. It's gross, and they are discussing writing strongly worded letters to the water board and to the chairman of the water company.
Yeah, because they're allowed like 2 pints a day or something. Is that this part? I'm sure Geraldine, when Alice is feeding the flowers, which she's already done, she goes, "Oh, I've only allowed 2 pints a day."
Yeah.
So they can't bath, they can't shower.
No.
It's a bit scary,
smells.
really, isn't it? Everyone smells.
Can't clean their dishes. Is Geraldine in a 90?
No,
It
she's in a
looked to
summer
me
dress.
like a 90.
I like that summer dress. It's white with florals on it.
White with florals.
Yeah.
Lovely.
But
I quite
white
liked
with
it.
florals is quite often a 90 style as well.
I'm not jumper. I'm not jumper right now.
But a very light cotton dress.
That's a lovely 90 jumper.
Thank
Jenny.
you. This is like my grandma jumper because it's woolen, little florals and white.
Whenever I see you wearing that jumper, it does make me think slightly of Geraldine's Vicar jumper that you admire.
This is
so
what
much.
I.
It's got that vibe of it.
This is what I want that to emulate. So you've read a truth about me there.
So everyone's in their summer gear, whether that's a nightie or a white dress with florals. Apart from David, who's still kind of. I think he might have taken his jacket off, but he's definitely still got a waistcoat on and is looking very dapper, if hot. And they're trying to write strongly worded letters, and the way that David's written his letter is. Dear Sir Michael, Dibley has now been without water for a fortnight, which is clearly, pretty well, less than satisfactory. And Geraldine's letter begins, Dear Sir Useless Baboon's Bottom, I think you should know that down our way you're about as popular as Judas Iscariot at a disciple reunion.
Great image.
So they've gone for different things in their strongly worded letter.
Which
have you ever written a strongly worded letter to someone?
I wrote a tersely worded email. Not a strongly worded email, a tersely worded email.
I don't know what that word means.
Tersely,
It sounds rigid. It's terse rigid.
Tensely worded.
Turgid.
I am. Sorry.
A tensely worded email. Slightly sharp,
Tensely
but not
worded.
strongly worded. I wrote an email on behalf of my niece who is, she has a dairy allergy, and they'd gone, her family had gone on a visit to a garden centre where they'd sort of advertised that children would do this activity and in exchange they'd get like a little prize, a reward. The only rewards they had available all had dairy in. And I wrote just a slightly, like I said, not a strongly worded email, but a very disappointed email to them, like on her behalf. They probably don't know that I did this.
I'm very disappointed in you.
Yeah, just saying, you know, I really think you should have options available. And because they talk about being accessible, you know, on their website as well. And I was just, at that point in time, I was just so upset on her behalf.
Aww.
Because she was really upset and disappointed about there was nothing she could have, even from the cafe. Like, there was nothing available. So, and I just have memories of being her age and having that experience and just feeling so unwelcome. So yes, I have written an email of complaint before, but not on the level here. I was very surprised that David's email was not more scathing, because we've had a taste of his scathing letters before.
I mean, the one to the bishop when he complains about Geraldine.
Yeah. Precisely.
Yeah.
He's practically pleasant to the water board.
Maybe he's softening. Maybe he's going for a different tact.
It's because he's a knight of the realm that he's writing to.
Well, when I write my strongly worded letters, I'm not rude. I go for the emotional thing. And the one that I wrote was to the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, when we were protesting about not invading Iraq, or not going into Iraq. And I wrote an emotional poem to try and persuade him to not invade Iraq. But I don't think it didn't work. It didn't work. Instead of the aggression, I went for the emotion, but still.
The thing about writing letters and emails of complaint to MPs is it can be extremely disheartening.
So they move on from their letters to talk about ideas for the statue, and they come up with some people, but apparently murderers aren't allowed, and Elizabeth I did stay in Dibley, but she was violently sick all night, so she probably wouldn't appreciate a statue, so it's looking more like Carol Vorderman it is. But then Geraldine says, you know, you could spend all the money on buying water for the village so we can all have a bath. And everyone raises their arms to say yes please, but then it stinks everyone out, so they put all the arms back down.
This feels very reminiscent of buying a new window and then actually giving all the money to charity and just replacing it with clear glass. That's a Geraldine move, really, isn't it?
But they mustn't have done this, because they do, spoiler alert, have a statue by the end of it.
That's true, yeah. I guess because the need for the water changed as well, didn't it? In terms of they received it back.
But even then, it feels very... It would be more on brand for what we know of the Vicar of Dibley, for that money to then be sent to somewhere where there's an even greater drought crisis and repeating drought crises.
That would have been a Dibley thing, wouldn't it?
That would be a very Vicar of Dibley move, but they don't do that.
They don't do
that.
No.
Instead, they go to the vicarage.
Now we're back in the vicarage. And they're running through their clean clothes, and it turns out that they're down to their Halloween outfits from last year. And so Alice walks in dressed as a witch, and Geraldine is a massive pumpkin. And it's quite a look. And the water company phones back Geraldine, because... They've received her letter, but Alice has to answer the phone because the pumpkin outfit makes it difficult. And she answers the phone with a phrase that I might start using every time I answer the phone now. She says, "Hi, vicarage, home to Jerry Granger, God's most bodacious babe."
Oh, that's lovely.
Maybe I'll change my voicemail, saying, "Reach the voicemail of the Reverend Rita Gibbons, God's most bodacious babe."
See, the danger of that is brilliant, but I have discovered that not everyone is as knowledgeable about the Vicar of Dibley as we are. I have in my entranceway a little picture I got on Etsy of Geraldine that says, "Enter if you're sexy, you love Jesus."
Oh yeah,
it's great.
And the number of people who've stood by that and gone, "Is that meant to be you?"
Oh dear.
Just not getting that it's a quote.
You have to explain it.
Yeah, it kind of loses its joy as a fantastic statement when you have to explain it.
Yeah.
You never seen Vicars. Well, I nearly said you'd never seen Vicars Watch Dibley, but that's us. Never mind. But on the phone call, it turns out that the water company have come up with a solution and they're coming to the village to explain it. So we head to the parish hall, and there's a bloke there. His name's Mr. Badcock.
Really? They
that was
don't tell us that in the episode, do
I thought
they?
that was a joke, but it is actually Mr. Badcock.
The guy who plays this character, I swear I've seen that actor playing very similar roles. Like, in fact, I recognise him. Is he the guy who plays a similar role in the 1970s Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie?
Oh,
No, it won't be him. I've seen him in similar roles where he's been playing that bureaucratic. I've used the word jobbo in my notes.
Jobbo.
Someone who's just about their job and yeah.
So Mr. Badcock has come to explain what the solution is the water crisis. He comes with this diorama of Dibley, and it's clear from this model that he made that Dibley's at the bottom of a kind of valley with the hills around. And so the solution that they come up with, and he rather brutally demonstrates this with a bucket of water, is they're going to flood the village of Dibley to create a new reservoir in order that people will have water. And everyone looks absolutely horrified by this. So much so that Owen just punches him in the face. It's great.
Yeah. Straight in there.
And when people are angry about this and say, Mr. Badcock says, there's been plans about this for months available. And where have they been available? In a cupboard, in our basement, in the Hong Kong office.
Which is that exact joke, or pretty much near enough, is the opening gambit of A Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's very Douglas Adams, where Arthur Dent wakes up to discover that his house is going to be demolished in order to create a bypass. And when he asks about, when he protests, they say, you received prior notice about this? Well, yes, but that notice was locked in a cabinet in a basement. That's very, I don't know, it's of that time period, I guess.
Yeah, so there's obviously the kind of like the funny side of this, but it's interesting. I watched this episode with a family member who was like, oh, that's actually really controversial mentioning Hong Kong because of the Three Gorges Dam, where, right, I learned recently, 1.5 million people were displaced and not given any land or any money or any options to move or accommodation or anything like that. No money for their land or houses. And were just expected to move to build like this absolutely massive dam back in 2003. So, and I know we've been thinking as well about other places in the UK where this actually does happen. So it's like that comedy thing, but it's also like, oh my gosh, this actually really does happen, which is, an interesting narrative to kind of bring alive.
Yeah.
A bit painful potentially as well.
Yeah, so if you ever want to feel sad, Google sunken villages.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And there are a number of places across the world where villages have been evacuated and been flooded in order to create reservoirs.
I bet they're fascinating places to scuba dive and explore in. You must feel like you're in The Little Mermaid or something like that.
But you're not often meant to swim in reservoirs.
That's true, yes. No.
It's interesting, but it's nationwide, I suppose. And it happens in Greece a lot. Not a lot, but I've seen it in Greece as well. Yeah. So no wonder Owen then comes with a fist of fire. Everyone's up in arms about it, aren't they? It's like, no, we're definitely going to dig our heels in over this one. We're not going to see Dibley flooded.
Yeah, they're going to fight you all the
For
way.
now.
And we go to the parish hall again at the next council meeting, and they're coming up with a plan and a petition as to stop this, to make sure that Dibley doesn't get flooded. And it's not going very well. And then David admits that he's quite happy for it to happen because they've offered £4 million for his house.
Which that's in turn of the Millenium money. So
I mean, That
It's a
is
lot today, but
a lot of money.
it would be even more money in with inflation.
And it's called out straight away. So Geraldine literally puts her finger on it. She goes, "Oh my goodness, you're in favour of it now because you're going to get this much money." But then suddenly that feeling is quite catching, isn't it, to everybody? And they start to think about what they're going to get out of it.
Yeah, but because David shows Owen how much Owen's going to get for his farm.
And he's like, "Bloomin' heck."
And he starts singing.
Who wants to be a millionaire?
I do.
But then Jerry makes actually a very good point about, it's fine for people like David and Owen who are landowners. And for Owen, it's actually a really good story because he'll be going from kind of comparative rural poverty to having lots and lots of money because his land is valuable. But she says, well, what about Frank and Jim? They don't own their houses, so they won't be getting any money. But they will be relocated to a residential community, as we'd call it now, for older generations.
Also known as Twilight Towers. Happy housing for the nearly dead.
Yes. But it is very quickly revealed that these are much better houses than the cottages that Frank and Jim live in. There's plumbing,
got heating
and indoor toilets.
Inside.
Yeah.
And it's even revealed that the two cottages that Frank and Jim share, not only do they not have inside toilets, but they have a shared outhouse for the toilet, which is...
Are you thinking about the Christmas? You believe that because of the Christmas frozenness?
Yeah.
No, isn't Jim's being frozen to
Jim is frozen to a toilet.
Well, I wasn't sure if Frank was visiting Jim and that's why he had to weave through his legs when he was frozen to the toilet, or whether they share an outhouse.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Well, still, they're not in an ideal accommodation.
Either way, they're offered much better accommodation.
Yeah.
So they're quite keen on moving, actually.
Yeah, and they start singing "Oh Happy Day," and it's glorious.
Just after, Geraldine's been like, "It's a sad, sad day," and then all of a sudden it's a catching "Oh Happy Day" from everyone, which is just really juxtaposed, isn't it?
For everyone except Geraldine, because I think because I think no one except Geraldine quite grasps just how different things will be, particularly for Geraldine. Geraldine, of the group, will be the only person who doesn't receive any compensation for moving. And in fact, it's very interesting she doesn't bring this up, and I wonder if her trying to bring up Jim and Frank was a way of also bringing up herself. Because in the Church of England we have tied accommodation, so our accommodation comes along with our job, and if there is no village of Dibley, there is no parish of Dibley, which means there is no Vicar of Dibley, which means Geraldine will have to move on.
Yeah, whole different place.
Potentially the church would get some money, the diocese might get some money.
Yeah. It's an odd thing in all of this, actually, because you'd think the diocese would have an influence, and that surely the building is listed in some way, like grade 1 or grade 2 listed, and I wouldn't think they'd be able to flood a building like that.
Or they'd have to pay a lot of money, which might be
not every church is listed. That's worth saying. Not every church.
No, but with the age of the one,
it does.
Dibley church,
it does
expect
look.
It to be.
It does look like it's got Norman elements to it. So, it looks like an old building. Whether or not it's historically, what's the word? There's wording they use, which is whether something is historically significant enough that it needs to be listed at a high level.
Oh right, I don't know.
Mm.
But and Geraldine says she's just been moved on to another place, which isn't quite how it works in the Church of England.
No.
I think it works a bit more like that in the Methodist Church, where you get told where you're heading, but we get to apply for jobs and kind of choose where we go and head.
To a degree.
Yeah.
I think we are often advised or
invited.
encouraged or invited to apply sometimes. But generally in the Church of England we have this application process, which is very much like applying for any other job.
Yeah.
And at the moment it's quite a difficult market of applications. Potentially back then it was less of a case. And with Geraldine being a female vicar and one of the first, maybe she's more used to the bishops having quite a strong say in where she's going.
Yeah. So the majority of people are quite pleased about all this and the money and the new housing that they're going to get. So we're over at Horton Manor and having a glass of champagne to celebrate and have a bit of bubbly. And Alice bursts in to say, "Oh, I've heard this good news." And Alice then asked they say about people being displaced, and Alice then asked the question about, "Oh, so where are they building the new Dibley?" And it's at that point that they realise that no, they're not all going to live together. They're not all going to be in the same community. They're going to be somewhere completely different and in different places, and this community will change massively.
Well, hats off to Alice. She just literally saves the day here, doesn't she? She's the heroine of this episode, really.
Yeah.
And actually this whole scene, as much as you may have picked up that we've found this whole episode a little bit lackluster, there's not much to get entirely passionate about in our conversations, but I think this scene in particular is a very important one in terms of talking about how important where we live can be to us, and a celebration of where we live and where we come from is a love letter to our hometown, really. And we have this beautiful delivery from Geraldine about how Dibley is her family, and she gives us some background about how actually she was rejected by 4 parishes before she ended up in Dibley, and which adds a whole new context to that first episode and her kind of confidence coming in.
Goodness me,
She talks about actually having a full body inspection. I mean, it's a throwaway joke. And they talk about how this parish wanted to make sure there wasn't a woman being snuck in with a fake beard, which maybe that's a reference to Pope Joan, if you don't know about that kind of pseudo-mythical Pope story. Check that out. Or, we've just reviewed a Monty Python film and they had...
Any women here?
Women in beards.
Yeah.
And she goes on to say some really lovely things about village.
And this fifth one, this strange little village, the inbreeding capital of the world, accepted me with open arms and became my family.
Yeah, and she says, and as someone who's in kind of more country ministry, her saying this is a real country village. We range from the mildly bizarre to the dangerously odd, Frank, because we live side by side, year to year. And that really captures what rural, semi-rural ministry and that idealised vision of parish ministry is, that we are all living together and loving each other despite our weirdness and our strangeness, and we are loving this place which God has given us for what it is, even if there are bits about it we don't like, even if it frustrates us, even if we don't get along. Actually, this place is worth loving.
And that spirit's catching, isn't it? Goes from Alice to Geraldine. Absolutely. And then we have quite an impassioned speech by David, of all people, who seems to have forgotten his 4 million quid offer.
Yeah, and suddenly starts quoting Shakespeare. Edits Richard II to talk about Dibley and how passionate he is about Dibley. And then there's a really lovely moment with David and Hugo, isn't there?
Yeah, it's really cute. Hugo comes over to David. So David has this massive speech. This Dibley, this... Oh, can you just give us a little quote, Ruthie? Give us a flavour for those who haven't seen some of her for a while.
This other Eden, demi-paradise, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, this blessed plot, this earth, this realm, this Dibley.
And everyone erupts into applause. And David moves across the room and you can see he's like, engaged with what he's feeling. And Hugo comes over and he's like, Dad, I've never been so proud of you.
Oh,
And he is like, yes, well, I thought it was appropriate. And then he's like, can I give you a kiss, Father? And David's like, I don't think that's necessary. And he's like, oh, please, it'll be very quick. And then he wraps his little arms around him and kisses his cheek. And David's like, yes, well. And it's like, it was a very David and Hugo encounter, but it's so sweet.
Lovely.
Yeah, I love it.
So everyone's rallied now, and the vicarage becomes Save Dibley campaign headquarters, and people are starting to donate money, and including Bros, which is super 90s to have Bros involved.
What's Bros?
Bros is it was a band of two brothers with questionable haircuts, like Jedward for the 90s.
Oh.
We also see Owen come in with a suggestion, which is actually the sort of thing that would stop this sort of development happening, which is for ecological reasons, finding something that needs to be protected.
Yes.
However, Owen's suggestions are a little bit macabre, a little bit violent, a lot of violence against animals.
Yeah, he's just chopping limbs off his animals, isn't he?
Yeah.
And suggesting
Not really.
he's bred a three-legged cow, where actually he's just chopped one of the limbs off. And he gets excited about this idea, and Geraldine thinks this isn't going to work. And David appears in the middle of all this chaos, and Geraldine has decided she's had a fantastic, brilliant idea, and it's the best idea ever. It's going to save the village. And David said, oh, good, so long as it's not an embarrassing publicity stunt and you're not going to chain yourself to the church. And she said, no.
Not what I had in mind at all.
Cut
behold,
to...
she has chained herself to the church.
Church. Which,
yeah.
yeah, no, I'm going to get angry now, I'm afraid. Not because of Geraldine or Dibley, but because of current politics. And please forgive me, I'm about to go on a bit of a rant.
Go on, Kate.
I, at this point, sort of started checking out of the episode because I was reading the UK Public Order Bill, which kind of, as we speak, our government is trying to push through Parliament, and then will eventually go into the House of Lords. This is kind of in response to the climate action protests and Just Stop Oil, and essentially making it more illegal to protest in ways which disrupt public infrastructure and disrupt the way that other people go about their lives, particularly making it illegal to lock on to things, so chaining yourself to buildings or others. Which is what Geraldine is doing now, with up to 12 months prison sentence, I think it said. Wow. And also, if you are suspected of carrying things like handcuffs in order to connect yourself to places, there's increased stop and search powers for police. Is also, I think there's some very sly stuff about not disrupting public transport, which, yes, is about not kind of blocking the bridges, but I think could also be seen as preventing, like with train workers being allowed to strike, which, considering they're not allowed to do other forms of striking which would keep the service going but stop taking payment, I think this is particularly problematic, and it makes me really angry.
Yeah, it's been a big discussion, hasn't it, recently in the UK about the right to protest, and even in just in the coffee morning that we have here at church, people have started talking about it, and you know, is striking the right thing to do or not, and some people are very for strikes and some are very against, and the way that we protest is changing, and it is becoming more disruptive, and that means it's getting in the news and people are hearing about it more. And yes, the legislation that's coming in is very worrying. The
point of protest is to be disruptive. And yes, that can be. I remember when the climate action protests particularly were taking place, where they were blocking the bridges in London. I remember lots of dialogue about people saying, this just isn't right and it's counterproductive. And you can see that, when it's stopping people being able to do business, to do their work. But at the same time, how else? It's sort of a last resort stuff. Like, we've been trying to say this for years and no one's been listening. So now we're going to create a peaceful disruption. It is peaceful protest. So that, people will listen and notice what we're talking about. And, there are debates about how the efficacy of this type of protest, but to make it illegal is deeply concerning. Because it's essentially just further stamping down on our right to protest what the government is doing, and the right to protest is incredibly important because it is an important part of democracy that we can hold our governments to account.
Absolutely. But this legislation hasn't come in at the time that Geraldine is doing this, and so she has chained herself to the church, handcuffed herself to the church, and it's a powerful stance that she's pulling, handcuffed in the middle of the doorway, which is a good place to put yourself for visibility, and it's a very obvious protest. But there are pros and cons with this, as we see.
As we see, yeah.
It turns out that Geraldine has a vicar voice, which I think is something that we've talked about in this podcast, about how people change their voice all of a sudden when they do a service because it's suddenly vicar mode. And she suddenly she talks about our Lord Jesus Christ. She's shouting into the church to finish the service of Evensong that she's clearly taking from outside the building. And so everyone has to leave crawling between her legs.
Why didn't they just do the service outdoors?
They probably wouldn't have been able to stand for that long. Because they're quite a senior congregation.
They could bring seats.
Yeah. And I feel like people could have slipped around the side.
They could have gone around the side for sure. That was frustration.
Use the vestry door, because we know there is a vestry door.
That would have been too sensible.
It did make for funny watching, I suppose.
It did make for funny watching, yes.
Bless her.
Interesting comments about the lady with a big hat, the lady with a feathered hat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just to smooth things over. Hugo's helping to provide some entertainment, and not the expected entertainment from handcuffs, but leaves a television in front and gets the signal out so everyone she can watch the telly. And it's amazing. And then later on the next day, Geraldine's still chained up, and there's conversations about needing the toilet, and she hasn't been to the toilet yet, but Jim is willing to take over so that she can nip to the loo because Alice makes her need a wee. And of course it's at that moment that the BBC turn up to record the protest while Jim is in the handcuffs, and we have a bit of a montage about the news that comes around from Geraldine being chained up to her church.
Yes, and you got that mixed news of Jim makes a comment in a very Jim way while he's being interviewed instead of a vicar, and he is saying, she's just gone to the toilet, you should talk to her. But he also talks about her bottom on national news. So that becomes the Sun headline. Was it the Sun or was it the Star?
Yes, of course it was the Sun. The Sun is the vicar's arse really lovely.
Yeah.
A unique.
One thing that we noticed in this montage was, it's really quick, a couple of seconds, on one of the photos of Geraldine. Not only does she have her low-hanging cross out, she's wearing what looks very much like Episcopal purple.
Yeah, in the newspaper, isn't it? Yeah.
In the newspaper.
Very bizarre.
It looks quite nice, actually.
It does look nice. Though, interesting. For those of you who don't know, there's very much common... It's this thing among clergy where we often gently rib each other if we're wearing any shade of purple. you'll say, oh, you've got aspirations, even if your
Yeah.
purple is lilac, which is not a colour bishops wear. But there is a particular shade that bishops wear, which is this very more kind of magenta-y purple, a more pinky purple.
Yeah, it's like a fuchsia pink,
It's
isn't
more
it,
of a
really,
fuchsia
when you think
pink.
about it?
Yeah.
It's like, wow.
Which they wear, and Geraldine is wearing that shade in the photo of her.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm sure she got a number of her colleagues got in touch with her to make fun of her for wearing that colour.
So we continue to see the montage, and like we see Jeremy Paxman talking about it, and there's different signs that are seen, and I particularly enjoyed the Friends of Save Dibley, and then there's also a sign for Friends of the Arse.
Oh yeah, just pour out all the people groups.
And we also see that baby Geraldine has joined in the protests, and she is also chained up in like a baby jumperoo to the church building to protest Dibley being flooded. So the protests continue, and eventually the boring man, Mr. Badcock, appears to give a statement and say that we've seen these protests, but it's nothing to do with the protests. We've decided to not proceed with the Dibley Reservoir, and it's not because of anything that's going on here, but it turns out that there is a very rare blue-crested one-legged chicken that lives in this area, to which Owen gives a bit of a wink and Geraldine just kind of rolls her eyes. So clearly Owen's methods of sorting this out have worked, and the waterboard guy gets a photo with the blue-crested one-legged chicken.
Which is just a chicken that's been painted slightly blue.
It works, crazily enough.
It does the job. It does the job.
Yeah.
And so they're going to look for other solutions, and Dibley is saved, and hooray, it's wonderful. They want the key to get out, and it turns out that Hugo's swallowed it for security.
Very Hugo.
I liked how this scene... Oh, no, not how it ended, but sort of one of the things is I noticed that Geraldine referred to Hugo as Hugs. That's like a little shorthand name, which I thought was super cute. Little Hugs.
So we go for celebratory drinks in the vicarage, and hooray, they did it. And there were tough moments, like when Ant and Dec appeared for a while, but yeah, they've done it, and it's wonderful, and we're going to celebrate. And David announces that they've decided, because of all this, that they're going to do a Millenium statue after all, and their chosen subject is going to be a statue of Geraldine.
So this is like classic Vicar of Dibley again, isn't it? Where there's a bit of a terrible misunderstanding, and Geraldine is like, wow, not this sort of thing doesn't happen every day. Spends a long time getting ready. Is wearing a particularly lovely outfit, might I say. Like a long sort of green shirt dress thing. I'm a fan of the colour, if I might say so myself. It's like a classic moment, really, isn't it?
It's interesting because up until this point, they have generally distinguished between the two Geraldines as Geraldine and baby Geraldine.
Yes.
So
yeah,
I don't fault her for the misunderstanding, especially the way that they present it to her.
Oh yeah, they
an
make
idea.
it like she's been the hero of this and started all this protest, and yeah, so we've decided that a statue of Geraldine's the right thing, and she's overwhelmed and doesn't know what to say. And then there's a really lovely scene. It's just a few things that was my favourite part of this entire episode. I don't think this is the best episode, but it's just the conversation that Geraldine and Alice have together. And so there's stuff going on in the village about the unveiling of the statue, and Geraldine and Alice are getting ready in the vicarage together, and Geraldine's doing her makeup and Alice is doing hers, and she's just put massive bits of lipstick on her cheeks for blusher. Geraldine asks, does she look okay? as she puts it, gorgeous or Y-front stretchingly gorgeous. And Alice says, yes, Y-front stretchingly till a little bit of winky sticks out gorgeous, which is just a great line. And then Alice asks if she looks nice, and Geraldine, instead of saying anything sarcastic, just says, you look like Michelle Pfeiffer. At her most beautiful, and then says, it's just one little thing, and like blends in her lipstick blusher to sort it out, and just says, now you look babylicious. And it's just this little bit I really love, because Geraldine has the tendency to just take the rip out of Alice for these different bits, and tease her and say mean things without Alice kind of properly realising. But this is a moment where they just have a lovely moment together, and it's beautiful. Yeah. And there's just other little bits about Alice says something about you provide the beauty and the brains, and Alice tries to think about something that she provides, and Geraldine just says the rest. And it's just, she could have said something really sarcastic about, you provide a brain cell or something like that, but they have this lovely moment. Yeah. And then they go out into the village to go and see this statue unveiled, and Geraldine's very excited, and the Millenium statue, it's unveiled, and of course, instead of the vicar Geraldine, it is baby Geraldine in a cot with Teletubby, what's it called, where a Teletubby mobile above her, and Geraldine is flabbergasted.
Just like a fake sort of like, oh yeah, it's lovely, sort of while processing, oh my gosh, it's not me, which is all quite funny. Yeah, it feels very Dibley, but also it's lovely. I like the sentiment at the end, actually, and David speaks of how they didn't want to look back and commemorate someone from the past, not that there was anyone inappropriate, as we found out, but actually for Dibley to look forward, which is really nice and really appropriate for the Millennium as well. I can't say my words anymore.
If we actually then think about local heroes and who is the person or the character which everyone just universally loves in Dibley, and it is baby Geraldine, like from that very first opening scene. Everyone loves Geraldine. She's baby Geraldine. Everyone loves Geraldine, but everyone loves baby Geraldine. And, they're voting about whether she's the cutest baby in the world. And although... yes, Geraldine Granger, Boadicea Geraldine Granger, was very much behind the Save Dibley campaign, and she started the whole movement of chaining herself to the church. By the end of the protest, they were all chained to a church, and actually it was a collaborative process with all of them together. So what's a better way to represent this future of their community where they've all banded together by having a statue that represents something which they universally love?
True. I think it speaks something really powerful into the church as well, taking it one step further, is actually that our children, our young people, are the face and the soul of the church in the years to come. And I think for a long time, we've kind of been like, actually, church and tradition and keeping our, older members happy and making sure everyone has, something to give ministry to. And actually our attention has been on children and families for the Sunday school or for a special service that's not the main worship. But actually, I think this also can speak back very powerfully into the church and the Church of England or the Anglican Communion or churches generally about actually where we look as well with our vision. And if it's not centred around children and families, then we're in trouble.
We're not in trouble. Yeah. They talk a lot about children being the church of the future, but that's kind of been talked down now and said, no, they're not the church of the future. They should be the church of right now, and we should be, engaging all ages in church. And
it is just worth saying it's not that we focus on young people to the detriment of older people. I think I've come across a narrative in ministry where people have said, well, our mission plan only cares about children. What about our older people who need support and need help too? And it should be all generations.
Absolutely, all
together.
That's the best.
Children are necessary for the future, and it's absolutely right that we should be focusing activity on supporting young families and, you know, making them, you know, helping them trust the church and believe in the church.
Am I the only one who found the statue of baby Geraldine immensely creepy?
It's weird, and it's also
so weird.
It's not going to last. Like the mobile is so fragile. That's going to break soon.
I have to say, I didn't mind the baby Geraldine, but the mobile was creepy because it was moving. I was like, because it was just like basically a massive grey. It looked like sort of Play-Doh or something. It was like moving, like wobbling in the wind, and I was like, oh no. If it had just all been solid, I'd have thought, yeah, super cute. But because it was moving, it freaked me out.
No, the baby's eyes were just...
Yeah.
Oh, really? I don't think I've spent long enough there.
An interesting choice to do a baby in a cot. They could have done something more interesting with actually kind of older Geraldine holding baby Geraldine. That would have been lovely.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just weird, and that... It's going to be so damaged by vandalism or like 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. It's just going to be like bits are going to have been broken off.
She's going to live with that in the village.
It'll be a haunted statue.
Well, do you know what I thought? I thought when Geraldine the baby grows up, and you know when you do those, say if you're in a new group or at like PCC, you'll do like, what's one thing about you that nobody knows? And hers can always be, there is a statue erected in my, not memory, that sounds
in my honour,
not right. Yeah, a statue is erected in my honour. I'd be like, people would be like, nah, no way. Or they'd be like, oh, who's that? Who's the famous one in the room? But no, it's Geraldine as a
baby Geraldine.
But anyway, she's not a real life person, so she'll never actually really encounter that. But that's where my brain went anyway.
The episode then finishes, of course, always with a joke, and we don't often talk about the joke, but I wanted specifically to mention this joke because Geraldine does the thing that we're accused of and we're called all the time, which is Bible bashers, and she literally bashes Alice over the head with a Bible.
Poor Alice.
Poor Alice. Because she improves the stick joke.
She does. What is it? What's brown and sticky? A stick.
Yeah.
And for Alice, it's not like intellectual enough. It's not true to life enough. She needs it to be real and factual. And then she's like, Geraldine, then you'll get a laugh. If your joke actually makes sense, then you'll get a laugh. Come on, this is how you can improve it.
Yeah.
But,
and because of the life stage I'm in, as soon as I heard that joke, I just had the stick song from Hey Dougie dancing around my head, which I don't know if you two know particularly well.
Sadly not.
Here's a little taste of the stick song. Stick, 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 sticky, sticky, stick, 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 etc. It's like a rave song. You listen to it once and it irritates you, and by the fifth listen, you're like, "This is an absolute banger." What a tune! I will accompany our pictures for this week with the stick song in honour.
Looking forward to that already.
So, what have we learnt from this episode?
I don't know, it's a filler one, isn't it?
It's a bit of a filler episode. I think there's interesting reflections about protest and the role of the church in protest and whether we should be leaders in protest. That's a whole other episode, really. I just got angry about politics for the moment. Geraldine the baby is very cute, and
we can all agree on that.
It's just a little bit of a. Tell us what you think about this episode. What did we miss about this episode? What exciting things did you like about this episode?
Or do you agree with us that it's a bit like, there's good bits in it. Like my highlight is the Geraldine and Alice talking together right at the end and seeing how their friendship has developed and grown. I guess it's an episode about community and the value of community. Yeah,
definitely that scene where it's a love letter to our communities and our small villages. That's beautiful. I like that.
Yeah, definitely. And how it takes a team of people to have good ideas as well. It's never just Geraldine as the leader or David Horton as the council chairman. Actually, good ideas and inspiration comes from all different kinds of people, all different ages and seasons of life as well.
And the future of our church and communities is all generations being brought together, and we finish on a very hopeful note with baby Geraldine.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vicars Watch Dibley. Thank you to Toby for editing our ramblings.
Any views expressed in this podcast are our own and don't necessarily represent those of the Church of England or any other organisations with which we are affiliated.
And as always, bless you for listening.
Here's my joke, guys. Seeing as it's summer, I have a little summer joke for you. What is brown, hairy, and wears sunglasses?
A beaver.
Cousin it.
No, it's a coconut on vacation.
That's awful.